Well, the Iranian regime has ordered 40 days of national mourning for its assassinated supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Israel says it killed him in a wave of strikes on Iran, carried out jointly with the United States. Iran has hit back with attacks on Israel and US military bases in several Gulf states. The Pentagon says 3 American soldiers have been killed. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has vowed revenge for the supreme leader's death in a statement read out on state television.
Today, the Interim Leadership Council started its work, and with the help of God, we will continue the path of Imam Khamenei, the path of the dear leader, and the path of all justice seekers in the world with strength. The armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran are acting with strength to destroy the enemy's bases, and they will continue to take action and disappoint the enemies as always.
Sarah Bazubandi is an Iran analyst and non-resident research fellow at the Institute for Security Policy at the University of Kiel here in Germany. She joins us from Hamburg. Good to see you, Sarah. I want to start by asking how vulnerable you think Iran is. Before this latest attack, it was said that the 12-day war last June had already left the regime vulnerable. How critical are these hours when the country is without a supreme leader while being under attack, do you think?
Thanks for having me. Yes, I think the Islamic Republic is at its most vulnerable point since its establishment. Vulnerability comes from inside and outside. It comes from the fact that the Iranian people really have moved on from the Islamic Republic. Clearly, you can see in not just footages that you shared about the celebration and the jubilant mood across the country, but also the uprising that we witnessed and the violent crackdown that the state had in response to those uprisings. So the threat is inside and outside. I think just minimizing this to the military threat that is imposed by Israel and the United States is going to be an underestimation of the threat and the vulnerabilities that the Islamic Republic is facing at the moment.
In terms of feeling that threat internally, what do we know about the leadership structure in Iran? Without a leader, how difficult is it for the regime to make the sort of clear and quick decisions needed at this moment?
Sure. So there are several things. One is that there was a crippling centralization of political power by Khamenei and his inner circle over the past 2 decades or so. So he managed to undermine the power of the presidency, the power of the Majlis. Everybody was very much filtered through him personally. The Supreme Council for National Security is also very much managed and controlled by direct and indirect appointment by him himself. Also, over the years, it seemed like there was a concerted, focused attempt to eradicate anybody who was possibly a viable option for post-Khamenei supreme leadership. It started from Ayatollah Rafsanjani all the way to the death of Raisi, former President Raisi, and one of the Larijani brothers, Sadiq Larijani, the former head of judiciary, who didn't really lose his life, but he was subject of political assassination and character assassination. He was accused for a whole host of wrongdoings, as I'm not going to get into the details of them. So the issue is that the power was very much concentrated and centralized, and now there is a huge vacuum, and there are not many viable options. There is, according to the article number 111 of the Constitution, already a council formed, as your video showed. Pezeshkian announced it. And this council is formed of the president, one of the members of the Guardian Council, and the head of the judiciary. They are in charge now to run the country in the absence of the supreme leader, whilst in the background, the assembly of experts is consulting and finding the next viable option and the next candidate for the supreme leadership, or a set of candidates. Then they are supposed to vote and select one of them.
So I want to talk about the economic situation here that's going on in the background while this conflict goes on. What kind of global economic impact do you expect, particularly with the potential of an oil price hike and the disruption of shipping routes? But how do you expect that economic situation to play out in Iran, given that these protests originally started because of a cost of living situation? Is this going to get worse for Iran?
Inside Iran, people are reporting a constant increase of inflation, constant rise of price of food. Food is not scarce, but it's increasingly unaffordable. And this is, I expect, in these conditions, going to get worse because trade routes and transportation and logistics, everything is under attack because of the war condition, but also the ability of the government to export hydrocarbon resources, which was the only and has been the only source of government income for many decades, is now threatened. I personally don't think the blockage of Strait of Hormuz is something that Iran would very much look forward to, because it's not just going to affect the Arab countries, Arab oil exporting countries of the region, but also it's going to affect Iran itself. So it would not be on the top list of options by the Islamic Republic, I would imagine. But nevertheless, given these current dynamics, I think it's very hard for Iran to export. And remember, a lot of these exports of Iran hydrocarbon resources were done through some of the regional powers and some of the regional exporters. Iraqi government helped them, Emirati government helped them, Omani government helped them. Now they managed to alienate everybody in that region with shooting short-range rockets and missiles at various infrastructures and various targets. So it's going to be very difficult economically, a difficult time economically as well.
Sarah Basubandi from Kiel University, thanks so much. All right, let's get more from Khazra Arabi. He's the director of the IRGC research at United Against a Nuclear Iran. That's an advocacy group in the United States. Khazra, good to see you. Iran has been retaliating against the US and Israel. How long do you think it can sustain these counterstrikes, and who do you think might blink first?
Well, look, the focus of the United States and Israel has been to first decapitate the regime's ability to retaliate, to launch attacks. And we've seen that the regime, the Islamic regime, has not only been trying to strike the United States and Israel, which it has been launching missiles towards, but has also been targeting civilian infrastructure, densely populated civilian areas in the states that have not been involved, in the Arab states of the Persian Gulf, in the United Arab Emirates, for example, using really terrorist tactics that have tried to target densely populated civilian areas, hotels, etc. That really gives you the nature of this regime. It is a terrorist regime, tactics that really only terrorist organizations use. How much has it got left is the key question. Look, Israel and the United States will focus on decapitating its resources, its ability to continue this wave of terror. But the regime itself also has an asymmetric capability. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is a prescribed terrorist organization, including in Germany. Recently, it was prescribed by the entirety of the European Union. The IRGC operates as a terrorist organization. Its modus operandi is terrorism, hostage-taking, hijackings. It does have terror cells across the world. So the regime has yet to activate those terror cells completely, but that threat exists as well. And I think it's very important, particularly in Europe and the wider Western world, that their governments take effective steps to counter any effort by the regime to conduct terror on their territory.
So you studied the Iran Revolutionary Guard, or the IRGC. What role are they playing in this leadership transition or leading Iran at the moment, and what can they do? They tend to talk a big game. What are they actually going to do? Are they licensed to get out and take action themselves, or do they have to wait for a new supreme leader?
Well, look, the IRGC operates as the ideological armed force of this regime. They are servants to the clergy. They are actually clerics in military uniform. All of them undergo indoctrination. And as part of their indoctrination, they study Shia seminary studies. So technically, they are also mullahs. They are also clerics. The IRGC is at the core of power in this Islamic regime. Together, however, with the Office of Supreme Leader apparatus, we recently published a report that exposed the Office of Supreme Leader, the Beit Rahbari, has an extensive architecture. Khamenei had designed the Office of the Supreme Leader in such a way to be able to ensure continuity if he was ever killed or if he had to hide underground in a bunker. Now we know he is eliminated. This Office of Supreme Leader, the Beit architecture, its infrastructure, together with the IRGC, their task now is to ensure that a power vacuum does not emerge and that continuity will prevail. This is about the invisible state, the deep state. So what we're seeing at the surface level, the government officials, etc., they are not the ones in charge here. The actual ones in charge, the actual force in charge right now is the Office of Supreme Leader, the Beit apparatus, and the IRGC. They're designed to ensure continuity. When a new Supreme Leader is selected, they will be servants to that Supreme Leader.
Katsura, the Iranian regime has repeatedly said that it doesn't want to develop a nuclear weapon. What do you make of that threat being used to justify these strikes by the US and Israel?
Well, it's quite clear that the regime, the Islamic regime, is intent on developing a nuclear weapon and has been doing so for the past 30 years. It's been pursuing a nuclear program. And even in the last few years, it has been speeding up its attempt to acquire nuclear weapons. This is an imminent threat not only to Israel, not only to the wider Middle East, but also to the West. This is a regime, by the way, that is the most anti-American regime that exists. It is a state sponsor of anti-Americanism. Let's not forget, they have tried to assassinate the US president. They have been waging assassination and terror plots on US soil. They've been targeting US politicians. They have been targeting US citizens. President Trump gave them a very clear warning. Dismantle your nuclear program, zero enrichment, rightly so, by the way, because this regime is an existential threat to the West. However, the regime ignored. The regime doubled down. Khamenei doubled down and said no. He is now eliminated. This regime, however, will not stop. So it has to be stopped. And I'm encouraged by President Trump's statements that this operation, this military operation, will continue to give space to the Iranian people to topple the regime and establish a free Iran. The most important point here is do not forget the fact that just a month ago, this regime, the Islamic regime, massacred 40,000 unarmed civilians on the streets of Iran. The people of Iran want this regime gone, and now the regime faces a nightmare scenario, a scenario that it always wanted to avoid. An external conflict taking place against the backdrop of a revolutionary mood on the streets of Iran, anti-regime sentiment reaching its peak. That's a scenario it wanted to avoid. However, it's currently facing it.
Katsura Arabi, we'll leave it there, from the advocacy group United Against Nuclear Iran. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.